Hey, deserving listeners, I have a very special guest with me on the podcast today. Paul David, my mentor and friend and father figure, is here with me in the studio. Welcome to the podcast, Paul.
Thank you very much, Kirk.
So I want to provide a brief history so that people listening right now can understand the significance of you in my life.
Okay.
Because just saying you were my mentor is, I think you're even bigger than a mentor in my life.
Okay.
So the history goes back to 1995, and I decided I was going to become a therapist on a whim, kind of. And I don't know how I heard about Antioch, because there's no internet back then. So I must have heard word of mouth, and I called the university, and Michelle Honey must have told me that there was an open house, and I go to open house. So it's all these prospective students, and I thought I was going to become a counselor, an individual counselor. And you were there in the front of the room talking about what I didn't know at the time was a very new program called the Couple and Family Therapy Program that you had invented yourself. And you were splitting off to some extent from the counseling program. And you were so convincing to me because I thought, well, one, you just seemed like a person that I wanted to follow. But two, you were talking about how couple and family therapists can work with individuals, couples, and families. And I thought, wow, that sounds kind of exciting to me.
Take the package deal.
Yeah. And later on, when I was in your role at open house and I would talk to these prospective students from your side of the fence, I would often say something like, when I was sitting in your seat and I heard that you could work with couples and families along with individuals, that excited me. Now, that's not the way everyone reacts to that. For some of you, when you hear that prospect, you're terrified of that. You say, oh my God, it's enough with one person in the room.
Right.
I don't want multiple people in the room. But for people like Paul and me and others, other marriage and family therapists, it's inviting. It's an attractor to have that dynamic nature of therapy or that chaos or that opportunity, So I would tell these prospective students, do you feel terrified and intrigued or terrified and dread? That might be a good indicator of the why in the road for you at this point. But anyway, so you told me, you tell everyone that there's this program and it was brand new. I think you had just started it a year earlier in 94. And I wasn't under that impression. I don't know if I would have started the program if I knew it was like a brand new thing. But but anyway, because at graduation a few years later, the counseling program had 30 students that were at the graduation ceremony, and there were 4 of us CFT students.
Yeah.
And I thought, how come there's so few of us? Anyway, so I signed up to apply, and you interviewed me. And half of the interview, you told me, because I was coming from business, from marketing, and you spent half of the interview trying to convince me not to become a therapist because I wasn't probably going to make as much money in psychology or in counseling or therapy as I would have made in marketing. And you were really, trying to make sure that I was sufficiently informed and into being a therapist. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I wanted to make sure it was a calling, not just some kind of a new thing to do.
Right, which it was a very new thing to do.
Yeah, well, it's a new thing to do, but you have to have, the calling in the sense that I feel this way of working with people is a preferred way and is a more effective way in the long run.
Yeah, right. So did you say that to a lot of people in the beginning, that you try to convince them to not become a therapist during the interview?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, because, eventually, once I was working with you at the university, there's a lot of times or periods of time where we weren't getting enough students to pay for our salaries.
Right.
It was anxiety-provoking.
Well, we're running an academic program that happens to be a business, and if you don't generate the FTE, then the business doesn't do so well, and you don't have the money to expand your program or pay your faculty. And so, as you know, we had to be very focused on enrollment.
Right. And my marketing background would come into play.
Absolutely.
When I became part of that team to market, because we're such a small university and such a small program that, okay, sure, we had a marketing team for the whole university, maybe at times, but between you and me and the listeners right now, they didn't know shit. We do how to market our
right,
program.
Right.
And if you're a prospective student, who are you going to listen to? A marketing person or a professor / therapist in the field. You know what I mean? Especially people that went through Antioch themselves. You went through Antioch and then became a professor. I went through Antioch. I became a professor. Anyway, so then...
Do you remember that picture we took on top of the roof where you and the other faculty were all awarded Teachers of the Year by the Washington Association for Marriage and Family Therapy?
No. Well, I don't even think I have that picture.
Well, there's all of us there. There's 4 of us there: Jerry, you, Kim, and myself, and we all had won that. And we said it was a marketing thing. We called ourselves the Dream Team.
Oh yeah. We weren't on the roof. We were.
Or I don't know where
in
we
the
were.
sort of entryway area.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Janice was there too.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we did that whole marketing thing. Well, these are people who've been awarded.
Right.
Every one of them. So
right.
We got something going.
Right. The award was for Washington educators. So it wasn't just like local. It was like the entire state of Washington. Right. So
we did stuff like that.
Yeah. So you accepted me into the program, and I started in the program, and you were my teacher. You were my professor in family of origin, in couple therapy, in systems theory. You're also my advisor during the program. And I am the sort of student that likes to kind of lay low. So I didn't really interact with anyone, let alone you, since you were intimidating and scary when I was 26 years old. And I was walking around the halls like the last couple weeks of my program. And I bumped into you in the hallway, and you grabbed me and you said, "Hey, you're about to graduate, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And you said, "Hey, we should talk." And I'm like, "Okay." And you said, "How about now?" And I'm like, "Okay." And you bring me into your office, your famed corner office with the window that you're in in that other building, the 6th Avenue building.
Yeah.
And you talked with me about teaching and about first off, you talked with me about the rest of my career. And I was saying, I don't really know. I was hired at my internship, which was quite a fortunate thing.
What was the internship? I can't remember.
Federal Way Youth and Family Services.
Okay.
I think they're now...
One of the youth and family service programs.
Yeah. They've been absorbed by a larger South Seattle area organization. But that was all that I was focused on. And, I'm 26. I'm very much a fish out of water. And then you say, well, I could help you with your post-grad career. And I was just like, what? Why? And you're like, well, I just like to help you. I was like, okay. So along those lines, Paul, patron Sheridan and Zaza, both of them asked the question, what was your first impression of Dr. Honda? What was your first impression of me?
Well, I just remember you as being very sharp, good looking, and ambitious.
Ambitious?
Yeah.
Really?
I don't think most people would characterize you as that because you're not braggadocio or anything like that. But I saw you as someone who wanted to, who wanted achievement and was ready to go.
Yeah, I was. I was terrified.
Even though you weren't particularly, you didn't advertise yourself that way.
Yeah, it was funny.
It's more of an intuition too.
Okay, an intuition.
Because you're not, you're young and
yeah,
you're not sitting around saying, "I want to be the chair." Or something.
Yeah, no. So in that meeting, you asked me if I ever thought about teaching, and I said, well, I thought maybe if I was still a therapist after 10 years, I would maybe consider teaching. It does mildly appeal to me, I guess. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know what it would be like, but yeah, in 10 years, maybe longer, when I have enough experience and age and wisdom, I can be a teacher. And you said, well, and then you offered to help me with my private practice, getting it off the ground, and also providing supervision for free, you said. You would give me free supervision. And that's huge because, supervision costs a lot of money. Insurance doesn't cover supervision, so you have to pay these supervisors their full fee, which is usually quite high because they're experienced clinicians like yourself. So it was very generous of you. and then you offered your office there in Wallingford.
Okay.
It was a really nice office.
Yeah, it was.
A big office. You said that I could just use it for free. Because often when you're in the beginning of private practice, particularly back then, it took a while to get it off the ground, and it didn't make sense to rent an office with only one client a month. Mm-hmm. So you would often need some mentor to offer up, the Saturday that you're not in the office. Mm-hmm. So you were doing that for me.
It was in the Bridgeway building.
And so I thought, wow, what did I do to deserve this? And then you said, well, as a payment for all this, Kirk, I want you to help me out with my classes, you said. And I was like, oh, help you out with what do you mean? And you're like, well, you could correct the papers or something. And I said, oh, okay. But in the back of my head, I'm thinking, I'm not good at writing, so why would I? But okay, if that's all that it takes, then all right, I'll do that. What were you thinking at the time? Because I think it's clear you wanted me to be teaching, but you also knew that I didn't feel I was up for it. Do you remember this time?
I don't remember details, but it's one step at a time. So, just taking smaller steps made more sense than, just shoving you into the classroom or something.
Yeah.
So, and also, I want to point out that I mentored you the way I was mentored. Oh. When I graduated from the UW, I had some experiences as a Vista. And I was at the Vista Training Center.
So Vista is kind of like domestic Peace Corps.
That's domestic Peace Corps, right. And there was a guy there named Jim Booth who was on the faculty of School of Public Affairs at the University of Oregon. He was a director. And the day I graduated, or the week I graduated, he called me up and asked me if I wanted to take on a faculty position there. Here I am, I just graduated.
How old would you have been?
I was, let's see, I don't remember how old I was.
20s?
I'm 77 now. Probably late 20s. And so he says, do you want to? I said, yeah, of course. I mean, I was kind of shocked. Yeah. But, that kind of belief.
Yeah.
So then I go and teach. I'm teaching at I moved to Eugene, and I'm teaching at the University of Oregon. And then another guy that I had worked with in Vista, named Ed Jacobs, was part of a program called the Human Services Program at Western Washington University. It was a brand new program. And he calls me up and says, how would you like to work up here? These are all people I had worked with in the Domestic Peace Corps.
And they were superiors of yours?
Yeah.
And they saw something in you?
Yeah. And so, again, I go from, I only have a BA degree, and I'm teaching in the School of Public Affairs at the University of Oregon, and then another guy calls me, and I'm up at Western Washington University teaching in the Human Services Program. And then another guy up there, once I get in that program, these are all mentors, named Dean Elias. He founded the Antioch program in Seattle. Mm-hmm. Same thing happened again. Dean asked me if I wanted to go down and teach at Antioch. All these people believed in me. Mm-hmm. All these people mentored me. All these people set up experiences where I could grow and learn. But they all did it when I didn't know that much. I wasn't a well-qualified person in a certain ways. They saw potential in me, and so I'm taking that story and bringing it back to you. Mm-hmm. Same thing. I was mentoring you the way I was mentored.
Yeah. Some of the patrons had that question regarding, were you mentored and how were you mentored?
Yeah.
But I remember you telling me some of those details, but I don't know if I made the connection that it was exactly the same as what you did. And not only what you did with me, but what you did with a handful of prominent Antioch professors.
And the people at Antioch and at Western were all interested in experiential learning. So they taught me a lot about how to work with adults, taking what's called an andragogical approach rather than a pedagogical approach with adults, which just means you base the learning experience on the individuals in the classroom. You engage them around their experience. You don't just, give your experience or impose some kind of a learning model on them that you think is swell, but doesn't really relate to them that intimately.
So what are the principles of this?
Well, the principles, you start with the learner. So like I mentored you, when you start the class, you ask people, what they're interested in. You don't just start the class and say, here's here's what we're going to learn. Yes, of course, there is a subject to the class, but it has to be based and primarily derived from the individual's own perspective. And so, at the beginning of the class, we ask people, well, what do you want to learn? Mm-hmm. And then you start evolving out of their experience the content of your class, mm-hmm. and you link it into their experience. So
yeah, that makes students also feel more safe,
right,
more connected. Also, putting them in the position of driver, they have to own their education. They
right.
can't just passively absorb it.
Right. So, we did that.
Yeah.
One trick I would do, I think you might remember this. We start the class, there'd be 20 people in the class. People would go around and introduce themselves. And then after that, I would go back and I'd memorize their names and go back around and talk to each person about what they said. Mm-hmm. And they're kind of thinking like, whoa.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a gimmick, but it gets them.
I'm not great with that. I could never.
No, but it was,
But you could. Yeah,
it was a way of engaging them in a way that said, I'm paying attention to you.
Yeah.
You're important to me. Your perspective's important to me. Yes, I'm the teacher, so a certain amount of that is important, but it's a student-centered learning experience, not a teacher-centered learning experience.
Yeah. And if the class was like statistics, it would be a different thing.
Yeah,
but a lot of the classes that were core to training to be a clinician had to do with how to be a human being, how to listen, how to know yourself, how to know other people, how to stretch your mind, how to paradigm shift, how to love, how to hate, how to be. And that meant that a lot of the class time should be centered around that and not a PowerPoint, right?
Yep.
So your class would have, often you would start with a poem or a comic strip, right? You would show these transparencies.
Every class had a cartoon and a quote of the day.
Like a Far Side cartoon or something.
Yeah, or something like that, yeah.
And then you would there would be discussions and then a little bit of lecture and then small groups and then demonstrations and then role plays, all within a 3-hour period, all these different exercises. I absolutely modeled my, teaching style off of that, obviously. Yeah. So then you ask me to help out with the class and I say, oh, okay. We had class, I remember this, it was Family of Origin, and you said, maybe you should come to class just so you know what's happening in the class so that when you correct papers, you can know the context. And I was like, okay. So I came to class and I thought I would just be sitting in the back trying to be invisible so I wouldn't interfere with anything. And then after that first class, you said, okay, next week you're going to be teaching the class. And so at no point had you floated this idea until I was kind of locked in,
Yeah.
Because you're my supervisor now, which you need to get supervision licensing wise anyway. Yeah. And you're offering me your office. It's free supervision. How can I say no to you? It was a great opportunity and I'm glad you did it. And I needed that push, clearly. But the way that I frame it to the listeners is that, and just anyone who asks, is you tricked me in a good way. I think that you tricked me beyond my anxiety or my lack of self-belief or something into teaching, because what ended up, so do you remember anything about that?
Not really.
Yeah. But does that sound like your style?
Yeah, it sounds like stuff I would do, yeah.
It was a strategy. It was like it, but it shows that you were spending energy and time to think about how to shepherd me. How to get me from A to Z. Right? You didn't just throw it out there and I turned it down, and you didn't just say, "Well, that's that. Moving on with life." You're like, "Well, what is the thinking there? Do you think?"
Well, it's the same thing that we're doing in our pedagogy, and that is, you're giving people an experience.
Yeah.
I was giving you an experience rather than, talking about it. Well, do you want to teach? I mean, that like, what? Because you've never done it before. But if you give, if I bring you in and you help out, you're gradually getting an experience and it makes more sense. You're more connected to it. Yeah. And then, you're more likely to jump in the fray when it's offered.
So as chair, as program director for so many years, you would almost always get professors this way. You would know them first, either as friends, colleagues, or students, and then you would slowly integrate them into Antioch. And then I started doing that myself, and I preferred that because I don't want to work with someone, because, when you hire someone off the street, even with pretty lengthy interview processes, you don't know what you're going to get until you're working with them.
And, they have to, the true test is they have to, be able to make it happen in the classroom. So you don't know that either. I
Right.
mean, you can support them and get them ready, but ultimately, if they don't have the
Chops.
to do that, then it doesn't work out.
Right. So it's more labor intensive, but the payoff is so much better. And you're much more bonded as a boss and employee because, when you're chair, you're their boss.
Yeah.
And so when I would do that, I would find it much preferable. The downside is that you're not usually getting the best candidates on paper, right? They don't have the best resumes.
Right.
Because the best resumes are people from out of state, and they apply and they rise to the top based on their qualifications. So it's harder to sell to upper administration, which you would run into sometimes.
But you're looking at interpersonal competence, not just academic competence.
I know.
And that interpersonal is like huge because you're teaching, and teaching involves relating. And if you can't relate, if you're just smart and know a lot of stuff, but you can't relate, no cigar.
Yeah. And I and you have seen some examples of that consequence playing out when you hire people through the normal interview process, some disastrous situations. So anyway, you say you're going to teach next week, and I agree to it, but it throws me into this massive anxiety attack. I mean, the amount of anxiety, I still feel anxiety about teaching. I hate being on stage. It's a thing.
Okay. Well, you're by nature more introverted.
I don't know if introversion is the right word. I don't know. I have a desire to be on stage, but I am terrified of being there. My body is terrified of being on stage. Anyway, so the night before teaching, 6 days later, I'm pacing around my apartment. I can't even think straight because I'm so anxious, and I am holding my cordless phone about to call you and tell you I can't do this. I'm sorry for disappointing you. Looking back, I'm pretty sure you would have just said, well, no biggie, you can teach next quarter or something. But I thought it was do or die, which I think was a good thing because it pushed me past it, and I didn't call you, and I did teach that class. It was on Bowen. And
Did that class go well for you?
Well,
I can't remember.
I remember so many details about this. The fact that I didn't run out of the room screaming and in fear was a success.
Yeah.
So seriously, I thought, well, I managed to speak for the entire class, and the students weren't laughing at me. And then right afterwards, I asked you what you thought, and I was sure you were going to say, you're a little nervous. You didn't say, well, you might have said that, but I thought for sure you would say, you're a terrible professor. I made a terrible mistake. And I don't know exactly what you said, but you just did. You said exactly the right thing to make me feel like, oh, maybe I do have an ability here or something. And so the next time I taught, the next week, I was a little less anxious and.
Well, I also started out in a class that's basically fun to teach. When you get into it,
when you're not terrified out of your mind.
Yeah, but eventually, when you're listening to other people's stories and getting them to talk, it's every person's interesting, and everybody's got a story. And when you teach that class, you learn about their stories, and it pulls you in, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, so from a teaching point of view, you don't just have to be Mr.
Know-it-all,
encyclopedia or something. You get to, engage people and then tell your story too.
Right.
So that's kind of cool.
Well, I think when you know your shit so well that you can just relax and enjoy it, then I think it goes well. But when you don't really know, I mean, I had literally just graduated 2 weeks earlier and I was younger, especially back then.
Yeah.
Most of the students were in their 30s, 40s, 50s. I'm in my 20s, mid-20s. just didn't think things were going to work out for me in terms of ability and when I was a student, I felt like most of the students knew more than I did.
Okay.
Anyway, so then I volunteer, or I pay you back for the supervision that you're giving me by helping you. But really, I was helping you, but it probably meant more work for you because you had to talk with me all the time and maybe degrade your class quality by allowing me to teach some of the class. So
No, but it was just a way of getting you going,
Yeah. So I did that for a year.
I mean, I didn't know the way you're describing it as you being so anxious. I mean, I knew that it was hard for you because obviously you hadn't done it before, and you wanted to, you had a high standard for yourself, so you wanted to do good. But that would be the best way to hone talent.
Yeah, and I would do that myself. I did the exact same model with my mentees. I would get to know them, then I would have them assistant teach.
Yeah.
It also, when you have an assistant teacher, it shows that the person really wants to teach because they're volunteering their time.
Yeah.
They're not just doing it for a gig.
Right.
They have a drive.
Most academic professors, are used to sitting in a classroom and having someone hopefully be quite knowledgeable and be able to present material in a very cogent way. And so that's kind of their model of, being intellectually adept and being able to present academic material in an engaging way. But it's all done in a way where they're the star performer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, or trying to be the star performer, and in the way that I wanted it to be. You're part of a learning process, and you engage the students with their experience, and make it more student-centered. It's not so much instructor-centered, and that just makes a richer kind of experience. Yes, you have knowledge that they don't have, but it's in the context of their own experience that it's expressed, which means it's going to be way more meaningful to the learner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that was the idea anyway.
Yeah, makes sense. So then you hire me after a year of assistant teaching. And by the way, throughout that whole year, you're meeting with me once a week, and
this sort of supervision.
For supervision in your office.
Yeah.
And we're talking about my early work as a therapist. We're talking about my personal life, and we're also talking about teaching. And every week I would teach, and then every week you would meet with me, and we would talk about what I did and what I'm going to do. And then after the class, we would talk, just a lot of you teaching me and mentoring me and inspiring me and believing in me. It was just this real belief in me that connected to a part of myself that wanted to do it, but would never have done it otherwise. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So then you hire me, and I'm on my own teaching, and then I was off and running and was teaching as an adjunct for many years, and then became full-time professor, and then you shepherded me or mentored me to be your job, to be eventually your boss, your chair, your program director. You had never had another person as a chair before, and you started the program. So then you wanted me to take over the program, and I watched you as a chair for 20 years or 15 years up until that point, and did not envy the pressure and the responsibility of your job. But I felt beholden, because I knew you wanted to retire, and I didn't know what it'd be like. I thought maybe it'd be livable, and I did it. And then after the first year, I was totally into it and did all the things. Or then at the end of that first year was our reaccreditation, and I just completely burnt out. And
accreditation is very tedious, and huge amount of time has to go into it.
Yeah.
And it's massively technical.
Yeah. It's like being a lawyer, you know?
Yeah, and there's just so many micro criteria about your program that you never really think about that much until you start going through the ringer, and boy, it's intense.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have a site visit, and you got to have
Right.
everything.
Officials,
I
three
remember-
officials fly to your town and stay in Seattle for a number of days, and it's like they're cops that are investigating a murder, you
Yeah,
know, and you're
yeah.
trying to avoid implication or indictment or something. And they're just, and you know, because you know that there are cracks in the foundation that you just hope they don't find. And the whole time you're just, and the problem with me is that I am too independent. I'm pathologically independent. So I didn't ask for any help. And so I basically just did the whole thing by myself, which was not a good idea. But anyway, so that kind of broke me in a way. And I started to get burnt out, and all the things that would bother you, of course, because it would bother you and it would bother anybody, like all the meetings and the politics and stuff, it just became unbearable at that point for me. And so I started to fantasize about an exit strategy. And we had some younger, more energetic professors that had it in them. You know, Jen Sampson, who's currently program director, she had already proven herself to be able to lead as the leader of the hoarding project and had her own clinic, I believe.
Yeah, she did.
So, and I think she was president of some professional organization by that point. Anyway, I thought, well, you know, I'll throw it out to her, and she really seemed to be into it. And she's been program director now for 6 or 7 years and seems to be going strong. So it's like, some people are made for that kind of job and some people aren't.
Yeah, I was actually surprised, though, that she ended up in that role because she's pretty reserved in many ways, and
Yeah.
And is seemed pretty polite and nice. And in some ways, you know, that job requires a kind of toughness.
Yeah, you were real tough.
And a kind of I mean, you know this from a lot of different things that would happen, where, you know, basically if you had to be willing to go to war for what you believed in, and if you didn't go to war, you were going to get creamed.
Right.
And because there's other people out there who were not. I won't get into details, but basically, I mean, like, you know, people just, you know, caught up in their own egomania or whatever, and so you have to be able to fight for what you believe in.
Right. The thing I saw you do was that you would fight for the students and your professors when outside forces were trying to harm us. You weren't just fighting for your own ego or your own benefit necessarily. You were protective of your professors and of your students, and of the field of marriage and family therapy as well. It sometimes would extend to that broader category.
Actually, Antioch, though, was the most marginalizing force that I experienced.
Right. Administration.
Not other outside forces. It
Right.
was more internal.
Coworkers,
things like that.
Yeah. People who on paper had more power than you did, but in reality, you always were at the top of the pyramid in terms of like political actual power. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because, you know, we would get new administrators that would get hired off the street and thought they were in control. Mm-hmm. But when you have professors who are the core of a university, especially ours, band together and say, look, pal, just because you think you're our boss doesn't mean we have to do what you're going to do. And this is pre-unionization, by the way.
Right. Well, we had I had forged cooperative relationships with the people in counseling psychology, which was big because we're all in the same psychology program. And Ned Farley, who was the chair of the mental health counseling program, and I always figured out how to cooperate and work together and merge our programs. He was a wonderful colleague to work with. And in some cases, there was undermining that was starting to take place.
Right.
And so that, you know, that's more internal dynamics going on, where the psych people, for example, saw the marriage and family as a lesser than.
Right. And, well, some of them did.
Some of them did.
And other part of it, so not only were you a bulldog and would fight effectively, quietly, but effectively. Quietly meaning you never yelled at anybody, but once you got momentum going, there was just nothing that was going to stop you. And everyone kind of knew that. The other aspect, though, is that you would forge relationships with people that you would have conflicts with. You would sit down with them for a couple hours and just chat, or about the issue at hand. You would quietly, just calmly, differentiatedly sit in the exact same way you're sitting right now, with your hands crossed across your, clasped in front of and you would just say, what's going on? You're just very calm. But also you would forge relationships and joke around. And I modeled myself after you in that way. Okay. I saw that you would do that, and I would watch how that would help so much when, the shit hit the fan and you had to go into the administrative wing and talk to a certain administrator. There was a familiarity there, a bond that could be the foundation for a compromise or an understanding or an influence. You would twist the screws on someone a little bit and they would give in, And,
on that note, when I was in the Domestic Peace Corps, I trained at the University of Colorado, and it was a school for training community organizers. And when you're trying to organize a community around various issues, you have to know all the players, and you have to have relationships with all the players, including the people you didn't necessarily see as on your side. So it taught me a lot about if you want to get something done, especially the people who are not necessarily supportive of you, is to form a relationship with them and get their point of view. Mm-hmm. And when I was working on in Nevada on an Indian reservation, that reservation consisted of Shoshone and Paiute peoples, and they were pushed together for lots of complicated reasons. They were not. The Paiutes were indigenous to that part of the world, and the Shoshone were pushed on there, and so the Paiute obviously resented the Shoshone, but in a more deeper way, tribalism is such that each party sees themselves as superior to the other. There's a principle in anthropology called the principle of segmental opposition. I am a good Paiute. I'm not a stinking Shoshone. I am a good Shoshone. I'm not a stinking Paiute. So they're pushed together. They naturally have animosity towards each other, but they live in the same area. They occupy the same land. They have to cooperate. And when I came there, they had no running water. And so, and the reason they didn't have any running water is because somehow they felt if they went ahead with the project, because it would be all paid for by the federal government, they wouldn't cost them anything, the Indian Health Service would install it. But they felt that by going with that, plus the Paiutes were traditionally water haulers, that one party would have an advantage over the other. Going back to this idea of tribalism, we don't want to do anything that will allow the other group to, get a one-up on us. And so I learned very early, you have to, to get people to work together, you have to really get to know them and understand their perspective and get them to talk to each other, et cetera, et cetera. And that kind of thinking I kind of used in terms of my work at Antioch too, because Antioch itself has got its own fiefdoms and groups and things like that, and so keeping that awareness and helping them, find ways that they can cooperate is a fundamental principle. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know how many people still do that at Antioch, really.
No, I don't think so now.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I feel like you were probably the best at it, but I feel like a lot of that generation, your generation of professors were like that. Yeah. And
we were, from that point of view, we felt we were bringing a kind of freshness to graduate education that wasn't there before, and so and to clinical training.
Yeah, a sort of radical, or not. You were trying to break from traditional, stuffy models of education,
right?
And you threw everything out the window and said, okay, well, let's actually look at what works.
Yeah.
You know, like with grades with Antioch, you got rid of grades.
Yeah.
Because you're thinking, do grades actually help to produce therapists that are effective or not?
Right.
Turned out there's no evidence of that, so why have grades?
Well, and as you recall too, the assessment you would give would describe the learning of each learner. So for that particular quarter, it describes actually what their strengths and what their weaknesses are.
Their grade was a written
assessment, which
assessment
is way
by the
more,
professor. Yeah.
way more valuable.
Yeah.
And
they did this well. They should work on that.
Yeah.
As with most students,
Right.
they should continue learning this. But
Right.
yeah,
And so it's part of their learning record. It becomes part of their transcript,
right,
which is, we thought, the way real evaluation should take place.
right. Well, let's take a break, and when we get back, let's talk about your recent diagnosis. What do you say?
Sure.
All right, we're back from the break. So just to summarize your importance in my life, and there are some more questions from the patrons regarding this, but for my career, by far, you're the most influential person on my career, I don't know if I ever would have became a teacher, honestly, because if you wouldn't have pulled me into your office that day and tricked me into being a professor so skillfully, I can't imagine how I would have become a teacher. Because, once you're separated from the institution and from those relationships, it's really hard to get your foot in the door, particularly when you just have a master's degree like I did back then. Mm-hmm. And I probably just would have said, well, I guess it's not in the cards for me or something. And then if I wasn't a professor, would I ever have become a podcaster? Because the podcasting thing emerged from a period of time where I wasn't teaching for a year or two, and I had an itch to teach because I have a drive for that, and I missed it. So, it's just really interesting to think about what would have happened. So recently, we were at a memorial, unfortunately, for our friend. Jerry was closer to you, and he had died. And tell me what you told me.
Yeah. So at the memorial, of course, there were all kinds of people from Antioch there, and I was telling them that I have early stage Alzheimer's, and that as I evolve in that neurodegenerative disease, I was going to do an assisted suicide with an organization called Dignitas in Switzerland. And so I was not going to go through the later stages of the disease where you're pretty much drooling on yourself and you've lost your executive and your body function capacities. So
what's it like to go through this?
Well, it's I'm writing an article about it right now, and it's called "Killing Yourself is More Complicated Than You Think." And what I go through is, the various criteria about what is a peaceful suicide.
Mm-hmm.
A peaceful suicide is one where you are using a method that is a calming method, not one like most other forms of suicide involve strangulation or gunshot kinds of things. This is a method where you're administered a sodium pentobarbital, which basically shuts your respiratory system down. You basically go to sleep within an hour of suggestion, and you basically die. And Dignitas is this organization in Switzerland that does assisted suicide with that means, and so that became my deal. But getting through their criteria is quite involved. You have to write a life story. You have to have medical records. And by the way, when you go there, you have to be in the early stages of your disease, because you have to be still able to make decisions that are legally binding in the sense that you're
You have to be competent.
you have to be of right mind and competent. So it's a little bit tricky.
Right. Because to me, it would, I don't know, I would prefer it if I were in your shoes, if I could live until my cognitive abilities were such that I was so confused, or confused enough most of the time, that my quality of life had significantly been diminished, and then take me out of this world, even if I don't comprehend what's happening. But I pre-consented,
Yeah.
But it makes sense, I guess, that you have to have the person consenting in the moment, which means they have to not be progressed in their Alzheimer's, and
Right.
which means that you're losing some time,
Yeah.
maybe not a lot of time, but you're losing some time.
There are 3 stages to disease. I'm going to simplify it, but the first stage is, of course, the obvious, where your short-term memory is compromised. And then stage 2, your executive functions are compromised, your ability to problem solve and things like that. And then stage 3 is you have those diminishments that go with stage 1 and stage 2, plus you no longer can control your body functions. Speech, balance, things like that are all compromised. So eventually you have to be taken care of, because you don't have the ability to take care of yourself, nor do you have the ability to make decisions, nor do you have the ability to remember anything.
Right. You're just confused.
You're confused, yeah. And I went to I'm seeing a neurologist regularly now, because he's trying to measure the degree of decline, which gives me a sense of what my timing needs to be. And, I go into the waiting room, and there are these people sitting there. They're completely blank in their facial expressions. No blinking, nothing. They're like zombie-like. That's what I don't want to go there.
Yeah. I mean, I thought about this when my uncle went through early onset Alzheimer's in his 60s, I believe, and early 60s maybe. And he was a world-renowned architect in Burbank, California, and was part of a architectural firm, as an owner.
High-functioning professional.
Yeah. And then he started to experience symptoms, and his daughter and wife started noticing, but he was always a little forgetful anyway, so they just chalked it up to that. But then it got pretty bad, and then they started to really try to help him, but no one really faced it, and particularly he didn't face it. And, there was a period of time like you're in right now where you have the ability to comprehend what's happening to you. You have the ability to remember, I don't remember. There's a certain point where you cross a line and you don't remember.
Right.
And so he just never faced it, which I think is what most people do.
Well, you because it occurs in your 60s, generally speaking, you chalk it up to aging, because there's a certain amount of diminishment of memory that goes with aging.
Exactly.
And so you can't find your phone. Oh, well, that's because I'm...
Senior moment,
right. And so you rationalize that to yourself, like I'm just getting old. But there's a distinction between dementia, which is a normal degrading of your cognitive capacity with age, and Alzheimer's, which is a disease that forms plaque in your hippocampus primarily and your temporal lobes. And so that plaque literally not only gums up the neural firing, but it eventually starts destroying neurons.
Yeah.
And so then you lose the capacity not only to think, but to organize your movement, and your whole somatic functioning is compromised.
Right. And I want to be clear, my aunt and uncle and cousin are lovely people. I don't blame them for it's a rough situation. I think you are in a very small group of people who face it head on, maybe because of your background and your intelligence. But did you run into that Y in the road where you're thinking, because, when you start to have symptoms of getting older, it's hard to admit. It's a loss. You don't want to admit it to yourself. So how did you overcome that?
Well, a big influence was my mother and my grandmother. My grandmother had Alzheimer's, and my mother had Lewy bodies. I know she had Lewy bodies because she had a craniectomy after she died. She was part of a study. You don't really know definitively until you form an autopsy whether what the exact problem was. But it's basically identified by the type of plaque that forms in your brain. And one type of plaque was discovered by a guy named Movie Body, and the other type was Alzheimer. They're just different researchers who identified the nature of the plaque. But anyway, I saw my grandmother completely deteriorate, and she became animal-like. And she was so sweet to me, and she was such a lovely woman to me, and she was just a great grandmother. She's my mom's mom. It was devastating to see her just turn into a feral state, and irritable, and just kind of ghastly to see her. It was a horrible experience to see her as a young boy that way. And then, of course, my mom did the same thing. I took care of my mom till the end. And
You're real close to your mom.
Yeah. And so that was...
You're the oldest son.
I was the oldest son.
And the eldest kid, and you took care of your mom throughout your life.
Yeah.
Even when you were a kid.
So that had a huge impact on my decision.
Yeah. Did you...
I mean, so it's more... I mean, people will say, well, you're being really brave or something like that. I get that, but it's more like I just don't want to go through it.
But I think it does take courage to face death. And
yeah, but I don't want to go through that kind of... I grew up as the oldest. I prize myself on being independent and in control.
You don't want to bother your wife.
Well, no, I don't want to bother anybody. And so that would just be anathema to me.
Yeah, me too.
So that's the reason. That's the long explanation for...
Well, I don't know if it's long. I think there could be a lot that you could talk about because I think it's infinitely deep in its...
It is complicated because you're basically planning your own demise.
Yeah.
That's kind of strange.
Yeah.
Because you got to, write
paperwork in your demise.
To do all this paperwork to prove that you are...
Allow me to die.
That you're of sound mind, that, you're not depressed, by the way. That's a huge factor. If you read the book In Love by Amy Bloom, she describes what it was like to go through that course with Dignitas, and in the process of giving the paperwork to the authorities at Dignitas, the psychiatrist that her husband Brian was seeing mentioned depression, and it shut down the whole process. Any inkling of depression...
Yeah. Well, why do you think that is?
Well, because Dignitas wants to be very careful that they're only doing this for people who have, are fully comprehending what they're doing and embrace it, and they're not being coerced by anybody else to do it as well. You can imagine in some situations where a spouse might be more interested in gaining financial advantage as a result of the deterioration of their partner. Things like that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I suspect that when it comes to depression, of course it's nuanced, but it is, for some, they have cyclical depression and cyclical suicidal thoughts.
Yeah.
So it's not a permanent aspect or a rational decision that one is making. And how do we make that determination? Because wouldn't having Alzheimer's and dying and the grief of that be depressing? Might that cause a little bit of depression?
Well, yeah. The distinction I will make and do make is it makes me sad.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say... Well, you have to be very careful. I wouldn't say it leads to clinical depression, but it is depressing. I mean, how could it not be?
Is it?
Yeah, I mean,
because
it's depressing.
In the times that I've talked with you about it, I don't hear, and you don't have to express or have, but I would be freaking out if I were in your shoes.
Well, I made it to 77. I have good retirement. I made it sort of almost to the goal line in terms of life, and then you have this, and so that's not exactly a joyous.
You had plans for the future.
Yeah. And, it's harder to read. It's harder to do a lot of intellectual tasks now than it was before.
Because that's a big deal to you.
Big deal. I'm a huge reader.
And writer.
And so, yeah. My writing works pretty good, but the reading is a little bit more complicated. I've just finished Walter Isaacson's biography of Elon Musk, 600-page biography of his. He's a complicated guy, and he's an interesting guy. And Walter Isaacson is a really good biographer. I don't know if you read his biography of Steve Jobs, but I mean he's up there, in terms of a really good writer. So it's fun to read. I still enjoy it. I just finished that and hope Elon Musk does a little better.
What do you mean?
Well, he's got Asperger's. He's brilliant. He just bought Twitter. He did pretty good with things like SpaceX and Tesla, because those are innovative technologies that he would be good at, and finding people who are good at. The Twitter thing is way more complicated because it's not just a social media company. It's all kinds of, and then he is a person who believes in free speech, but you have complicated bots, trying to shape social opinion, and how you censor or you don't censor those that information is a big deal for our society, and he's not really the guy to do it, because he's very torn about being heavy-handed, except when it involves him. And then he starts using Twitter to his own advantage. He does the same things that he won't do with others. If they annoy him or piss him off, he cuts them off.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a little off the beaten path.
Yeah, well, we go down that rabbit hole. But I had to say, for me, when you told me, it was a huge shock. I mean, in the same short paragraph, as you're talking, we're standing there at the memorial, you tell me, one, you have Alzheimer's, which is terrible, and two, that you're going to be dying soon. And you didn't have any caveats, or you just sort of laid it out. And on one hand, I respect that. On the other hand, I'm just like, give me a second to absorb this.
Yeah.
Do you find that reaction from people?
Sure. Well, anytime you talk about killing yourself, that's going to cause a reaction of people that's mixed.
Well, I mean, I don't know exactly how I felt then, but now I totally get it. What are you going to do? I mean, it's the right choice. It's the logical. It's the choice for yourself. It's the choice for your family. It's the choice for your legacy, if you will.
Right.
It's the choice for.
I didn't mention this, but forgetting about all the emotional stuff, there goes your retirement. Because what happens is, once you need skilled nursing care for over 6 months, I believe, then it comes out of your pocket. So you have health insurance.
Oh, if you hadn't had, if you
have health insurance, it's not going to cover it after 6 months.
If you didn't choose to kill yourself, then
you'd bankrupt your family.
You would bankrupt your family.
Yeah,
right?
They run your account down to zero.
Right.
So.
Right.
So most people don't think about that, but you're imposing a lot when and people are going to, once you're in a nursing home, they're going to want to, take care of you. I mean, that's human, but they're going to charge you an arm and a leg.
Yeah.
Most of the memory units are in the $10,000 a month category.
Yeah.
So there goes your retirement.
Why Switzerland?
Oh, I don't. That's just where they are.
You can't do it in the States?
No.
It's not. I thought they had Canada and the United States. I thought they had
you have right to die laws, but that's when you have 6 months to live.
Oh.
By the time you have 6 months to live with Alzheimer's, you don't know who you are.
So you have to be decidedly by two independent physicians 6 months to live.
Yeah. So then
seems like it should be modified to include.
Yeah, but it's not, and so that law works good. I mean, it's effective for people with cancer, things like that, but it's terrible for someone who has Alzheimer's because you're so far gone. What's the point?
Yeah. Is it expensive to do this? Seems like flying.
Oh, yeah. It's about, well, you have to get there. And I'm going to bring my wife, my son, and my daughter-in-law because I want them to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So
when is this, by the way?
Probably in the, I don't have a date with them yet, but I'm shooting for the fall.
Okay.
So getting that organized is complicated, maybe later, but that's the idea, is to do it while I am still of sound mind. I mean, that's the delicate balance. I want to live as long as I can,
Right.
but I don't want to postpone it so that the disease progresses in such a way so that I can't be competent.
Right. Would there be a scenario where you would move the date forward if your symptoms progress faster than you think they would?
I'm in the beginning of the middle stages, so I got some time. I pressed my neurologist about it, and of course, he's reluctant. The standard deviation is large because it's so individual for each person.
Would there be a scenario where you might get another couple of years?
Well, here's the data. In the United States, the time between diagnosis and death, the mean is 7 years. So I was just diagnosed in the last year, but that means I've had it. I've already progressed a certain amount during that time, because you don't.
Death by Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the research is such, they know when you're diagnosed, so they can measure that, and then they just calculate,
right.
or just
But
measure.
there's so many variables. Some people resist going to the doctor.
Some people live 15 years, and
some people are like you, where they're immediately going to the doctor.
Yeah, right.
So,
but
people don't have access to.
That's the data I have.
But your neurologist believes that by 2025 it'll be too late.
He wouldn't say that way, but what you do is you say, I have to meet the standard of competence, and would the fall be too soon or too late, given what you've known so far, to demonstrate competence? I'm not. You don't really put it in terms of suicide, but competence.
Right.
And so he can say, he said, that's probably doable. That's how it comes out. It doesn't come out where he can give anything definitive, but
right.
But you can shape the question in such a way as ask him, does he think, given what he knows, that would be a reasonable time period? And it's obviously shorter than longer, meaning, I think I would progress. If it's 7 years, I still would have 2 or 3, maybe possibly good years. But right now, it's difficult because, just to give you an idea, when I wake up each morning, I don't know what day it is. Now, when you wake up, sometimes you don't know what day it is, but most of the time it's built into your clock.
Yeah. There's references 2 days ago was Sunday, so it must be Tuesday.
So I have to look at my phone to see what day it is.
So what else do you experience along those lines?
It's more complicated to do sequential tasks.
Like chores?
Well, not so much that, but let's see. Maybe I'll switch a little bit. Where'd you park your car? You drive your car to the Walmart, you park it in the lot. It's a crowded lot. You go into the store, you come out. My brain doesn't track where the car was parked.
Do you have workarounds to?
Well, yeah, but what I have to say is I'm in quadrant X, and I'm in the left part of quadrant X, and I'm leaving the car there. I have to make a conscious effort to say, this is the marker where the car is. Whereas when you go to Walmart, you just right. where you put it, and you just go into Walmart, do your shopping, and come back out and go back to your car without a lot of fuss.
Yeah.
But for my brain, that's not the case. That's a simple example, but then more complicated tasks that involve, I was talking about sequencing, are, the simple way I would put it is, if I ran off some stuff on a printer, and then I ran off other stuff that had to integrate it with, I would have trouble putting the two stacks together in sequential order that they needed to be placed. I sound a little abstract. I wish I had a better example, but it's not tracking disparate sequences that you're engaging in a way that I wouldn't even think about.
So if you were working at the university, you'd run into that a lot, probably. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because there's a lot of like office tasks that require sequencing and remembering steps and stuff.
Right, right.
Like Sakai, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Would have been harder for you.
Yeah, right. Definitely.
Huh. Well, and you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but how do you feel about dying this year?
One part of me wants to get it over with. It sounds a little strange.
Why?
Well, just because I don't want to be confused. You know, I hate not being able to navigate, and I hate not being able to read. And I mean, I can read now, but I mean, I would hate the prospects of that going away.
I mean, intellectual abilities, of course, are important to everyone, but to people like you and me, it's like, it's everything.
Yeah. So that would be, that's the big sadness about losing that. And
so you're frustrated with that.
And then I get frustrated with, dealing with Dignitas. Like I had to write their letter of request 3 different times. Dignitas, I think, is somewhat set up to not be super specific so that they want to see if you can take the reins. And so I sent them the request letter, and in the request letter, for example, I asked them about the fee, because I wasn't quite clear about it. Well, you can't put anything about money in the request letter. They don't say that, so you got to redo the request letter. But there are a bunch of other technical details that they don't specify in the request letter that you have to, the only way you know is by submitting it and saying, no, that's not right. And this is why it's not right. And I had to go through 3 rounds of that. That's just the request.
And are you approved?
Yeah. Well, I'm approved so far. I've gone to the stage which they call the provisional green light. That's their phrasing.
And what's the next step?
Well, the next step is a more complicated one where you have to produce, for example, certified copies of your birth certificate, of your marriage certificate, things like that, certified, and they have to be certified within, I think, 6 weeks of going there.
Yeah.
So dental charts, things like that. A lot of medical stuff they want.
Dental charts?
Yeah, well, dental charts.
Why?
I guess to have a definitive way of identifying the body.
Why can't you just show your ID?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't really know the deal, but they want my dental records.
Jiminy crickets.
And it has to be certified.
I know this is kind of a weird question, but a lot of these, I'm not accustomed to asking these questions,
Well,
Paul.
who is?
If something goes awry with Digitas, have you thought about doing it on your own terms?
Yeah, but I prefer not to.
Right. Would that happen if things fell through?
Sure,
with
well,
Digital?
yeah.
Have you thought in detail about that?
Yeah.
Wow. Have you talked with Victoria about that?
Yeah.
How does she feel about it?
Well, it has to be something I do on my own. She can't have anything to do with it.
Right.
So it's complicated.
Yeah. Whereas with Digitas, she will be in the room?
She'd be in the room with my son and my daughter-in-law.
Wow. Golly.
And basically, you see the individual fall asleep.
Yeah, but Jesus Christ.
But they're not going to wake up.
When people die, it's hard, of course.
Yeah.
There's just something different about this, which I get, and I think it's the right choice, the moral choice, the compassionate choice, the self-centered choice, really, the selfish choice, but the selfless choice. And yet, the typical course is, cancer or heart disease, and they decline, and you're in and out of the hospital, and you're given, weeks or months to live, and then you go up, there's all these talks, and then you're in hospice, and you're in pain, and then they put you on a lot of meds, and you're kind of in and out of consciousness, and you just slow kind of slip away, and then eventually you just stop breathing, right?
Yeah.
And maybe people are there, but it feels like, I don't know the metaphor, but it feels like a symphony that is slowly getting softer and quieter, and at a certain point, you don't even notice when it's no longer making sound. Whereas with this, it's just suddenly just like in the middle of a symphony, you're just like, I'm done. The conductor just walks off the stage and says that's it, end of music.
Yeah. Well, it's the only way I know how to avoid the
Totally.
the
But
downside.
it feels, I don't know how to process. I've never, I strangely have an analogous situation when you have to put down your animals, your pets.
Sure. By the way, they use sodium pentobarbital to put them down.
Oh, really?
That's the same. I mean, if you ask a veterinarian to euthanize your pet, that's what they use.
Huh. Well.
And it's very peaceful.
Yeah.
So that's the primary.
But there's I don't know, death is hard.
Yeah. So the idea, though, a peaceful death is preferred over a more violent one.
Yeah.
And most of the other alternatives, like guns and ropes, are violent. The two most, you probably know this from your clinical training, the two most prevalent ways that people commit suicide in the United States is through guns primarily, and then ropes are the second one.
It's the primary use of guns.
Yeah. Well, we have the most, as you know, we have one of the most, we have one of the highest gun death rates in the world, and the people, a huge part of gun deaths are not accidental, they're suicidal.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know.
So the idea is a peaceful one,
yeah,
not a violent one, which is what you mostly read about, and one where your loved ones can be there.
Yeah,
that's kind of cool when you think about it.
Yeah, yeah, and you're conscious right up until the end,
right?
But man, I mean, I can't imagine.
I mean, it's not. It's something that it's hard to think about. It's hard to deal with it, but it's the most. Given that I don't want to go through the whole 9 yards, that it's the only thing I can think of that is humane and loving and peaceful.
Do you believe in an afterlife?
No.
Do you have?
Not. I mean, I believe that our matter converts into energy. That kind of thing.
Your consciousness.
But no, I don't. I think it's the end of consciousness.
Do you have dark nights of the soul?
What do you
Sometimes
mean?
Do you have, like, I'm not in your situation, and when my head hits the pillow and my mind has a chance to contemplate things that I would be distracted from otherwise, I think about the end of myself and the universe and the abyss, and it's at the very least disappointing, and at worst it's the most visceral terror I could ever feel.
Yeah.
Do you have those feelings?
Not particularly, but I think it's so hard to imagine death without inserting consciousness as part of it. But I don't think there is any consciousness after when you die.
Yeah, there's no abyss because there's no awareness.
But one of the things that religion does is it gives a different explanation of how we can retain a sense of ourself.
Yeah.
And so that I think human beings can't tolerate the idea that it's lights out, because that's all they know. That is being human, it's being conscious, and they can't imagine a state of being that is different from that. Mm-hmm. But I actually think, and that's why I think that serves the spiritual purposes that people conjure, because they want to have a meaning that's associated with some form of consciousness, so that they don't feel like that's just it. But right. I think what's it is the love, the compassion, and the way you lived your life and the way you've treated people. That's what you leave. Mm-hmm. But you don't take a new kind of consciousness with you. You leave it.
Yeah.
You leave your legacy by what you've done and how you've related to people.
So you're frustrated with the process at Digitas.
Yeah.
And you're frustrated with your symptoms as they are and will progress. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, you're peaceful?
Yeah.
Wow.
But, I'm not exactly looking forward to it.
What do you mean?
Well, why would I look forward to killing myself?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
But I'm doing it because I don't want the other repercussions that we talked about.
Totally.
So,
Are you...
I'm resigned to it.
Uh-huh. But were you angry or depressed about it?
No, I don't think I've ever really had. I mean, I'm sad about it. Giving up something that's precious. And, it's I think I've mentioned this before. I came all this way, and then, I'm 77, and all of a sudden my instead of being able to look forward to grandchildren and things like that. You know,
Right.
nothing.
Kind of like Sandy, you know, she retired, and soon after she died.
Yeah.
It's like there's a sick irony there.
Yeah, my son, as you know my son, Nick, he's having a hard time with it.
Yeah, I imagine.
So,
In Victoria.
yeah.
Myself, everybody, I'm sure.
Sure.
Your clients? You have clients. You had clients.
Yeah, I have not told them.
You haven't told your clients?
No. Well, I retired.
From your practice?
Yes, but they're legal.
You didn't tell them why you were closing your practice?
No, because there's legal complications involved.
There is?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because if your memory's not working and you're working with
But why
people-
didn't you tell them that?
Well, I didn't know I had Alzheimer's.
Oh.
But when I found out, I did not purposely
Reach out back to them.
There was like a 2 or 3 month thing where I'm closing my practice down.
So you were closing your practice down because of the memory issues?
Yeah.
But you didn't know you had Alzheimer's?
No.
And you were planning on practicing for years to come?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Okay.
I didn't, but my neurologist, as well as Victoria, emphasized to get going on it.
Have you considered, I don't know, sending an announcement to your past clients?
No, no.
Just.
I don't, I have to check. I don't know.
Do you think any of them would want to know?
Oh, yeah, you're sure. I haven't thought that out that thoroughly, though. I was more worried about any legal implications, which the neurologist emphasized.
Like they would sue you for?
Well, or they might feel like I wasn't all there.
And sue you?
Well, well, I guess. I think what the neurologist was most emphasized was that if I made a mistake, I didn't remember something, or I was asked to do something, and there was a negative consequence, that would make me liable.
Right. Which is why one would close down the practice.
Right.
But I don't think letting them know, do you have any litigious clients that would want to come after you because of that?
No.
Plus, I don't think it would hold water. I mean,
No.
You did everything you could, and you closed the practice as soon as you could. So
Yeah.
I don't see what the standing would be. To me, I would just think some clients would want to know, and
Yeah.
of course it's up to you,
Yeah.
but they, one, might find out from this podcast.
Right.
But they might, once you pass, there might be some obituary or story in a newspaper or something,
Yeah,
and they would
right.
read that. And I would imagine that they would have wanted to, because, if they hear about it in the newspaper, they might wonder if you knew when you were terminating with them, which you didn't, which they
Well,
might.
you're making a good argument. I haven't really got that far, but that's something to think about.
Yeah.
I'm not. I was just more focused on wrapping things up.
Right.
And a lot of the clients I've been seeing, the ones when I retired that I was seeing were people I've been seeing for years.
Right.
So, memory wasn't a key element because I had already
Right.
knew about them. And my long-term memory is pretty good. It's pretty good shape.
Yeah. What's your longest client you've ever had?
15 years.
Yeah.
Mostly people who are, borderline or
Right.
need someone to kind of be their
Yeah.
guide and, help them recalibrate.
Yeah.
And because it's, that disorder is filled with so much dysregulation, depending on someone to help them sort out things and, make decisions without them killing themselves or somebody else. They get so dysregulated. As you know, with that disorder, all kinds of very minor things send them into incredible dysregulation, and they get all worked up about stuff.
And they really benefit from long-term
Yeah, and
attachment-based therapy.
They need somebody to just kind of listen to them and not get to, help them. I mean, essentially, borderline is they don't have perspective, and they don't know how to their limbic system is so wired that they can't recalibrate easily, and they need someone constantly to listen, not tell them they're crazy, and at the same time to say, well, maybe some of the things, the evil that you are conjuring may be less intense than you particular you see right now.
So at the end of this segment that we're talking, is there anything you'd like to say about this topic in addition?
No, but it was fun to hear you talk about your relationship with me because I've never heard a rendition of it.
I've told you it before.
Well, not in the way you just, you gave
maybe not that elaborate. But
yeah, it was interesting because some of the stuff, like, I didn't remember some of the details.
Yeah.
Like asking you to
teach
and things like that. I forgot about how that.
I have a lot of memories from that.
I forgot about how that took place.
I have a lot of memories. But is there anything you would like to say more about dying?
No, I pretty much described that. I don't have a lot more. I just hope I can get through the Dignitas thing in one piece.
Do you think that the Dignitas thing is like occupying all of your soul so that you can't stop to...
That's a good observation. You remember what I was like around accreditation?
Yeah.
And there would be something wrong with something, and we had to fix it. If we didn't fix it, and it would preoccupy me.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same. I'm geared to, there's an obstacle of, obsessing about it.
Yeah.
And so the Dignitas has taken up that.
Is that a good thing?
No, but
Right.
It's
a thing.
It's something you need to have if you want to get it done.
Does your wife get frustrated with you about this?
No.
How does she
Not
feel
particularly.
about it?
Well, she's devastated.
Yeah.
But she leaves it pretty much up to me.
Yeah.
So she doesn't do any pinch hitting or anything. It's up to me to. But it's so unbelievably bureaucratic to get this done.
Yeah. Well, she was the one that told me because I was talking with her about Jerry dying.
Yeah.
Jerry and her were very close.
Very close, yeah.
Like you were very close to Jerry, but your wife was really close to Jerry.
Mm-hmm.
And Jerry dying, Jerry was at your house for dinner,
Mm-hmm.
and he was driving home, and he went to the store and got out of his car and got hit.
Yep.
So he dies, and in the same period of time, your wife knows that you have Alzheimer's and that you're going to be dying soon. So for her, her life is just completely upended.
Yeah.
Final question about this for now. When you think about what you've left behind, both family, love, all the good times, in addition to that, there's your career. And I've always said, and I've said this to your face, that I think a wing of the university should be named after you because of how much blood, sweat, and tears you put into it and how many people, professors, students, clients down the line benefited from you being a workaholic, frankly. Like you worked a lot, and it was your project, it was your mission to make this thing work for everybody. And you didn't get paid very much, you know that. Antioch doesn't pay what it should. Not that they can necessarily, because it's not like there's some owner that's walking away with billions of dollars or anything. It's a tough business, but how would you like people to remember you?
Somewhat the same as I would like people to remember me as a therapist, that I was able to help them recalibrate or shift the way they think about themselves or they feel about themselves, and that they became, in the case of Antioch, better therapists, in the case of clients, better people. So
you think of yourself as a therapist who happened to be a professor teaching a class?
Well, no, both professor and
yeah.
teacher.
But I mean, the vibe of helping people to connect with themselves and know themselves.
Right, yeah.
Regardless of clients or students.
Yeah.
You'd like to be known for that.
Yeah. Other than that, the stuff at Antioch, it's a little bit disappointing in some ways, but I mean, you're singing my praises, but I think at Antioch you just kind of disappear. That's it, and
right.
Nobody really gives a shit.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, be so cold, but it's,
Well, I don't think that's true. I
mean,
mean,
I'm sure
I assumed that for myself. Like when we were at the memorial for Jerry at Antioch a few weeks ago, I assumed I would walk into the building and no one would know me or care about me, or I just thought, well, it's been a while since I've had much contact with these folks, so I'll just sit in the back and I'll be invisible and I'll silently walk out when it's over. But as you and I were both experiencing, there's all these people, colleagues and students and others coming up to us going up to them.
Yeah.
There's a connection, a goodwill, an appreciation that I think is definitely there, but I think maybe people like you and I just assume it's gone or something.
Well, I was speaking more institutionally. It's not,
well, yeah, I mean, you and I don't even know the new administrators because they were hired because there's such a revolving door of administrators.
Yeah. So you devote I've devoted a massive amount of my career and energy to Antioch, and I'm sure it's a good program and et cetera, but there's no
statue.
There's no legacy or anything like that. It's just like you're replaced by somebody else, and they just go on and do something new, and maybe I'm on some paperwork somewhere, but that's about it.
Maybe not even that.
Not even that, maybe.
Yeah.
So that's the part. But as far as the people, obviously that's been.
You might be in the handbook. I mean, I wrote you into the handbook as the founder, and I told the history. When I wrote the handbook, when I became chair, I had a history of the program page because just a page write up, and I included because it's kind of interesting, and I think like if you're a student in the program, you would want to know what the history is, and other instructors as well. But so you might still be in the handbook, but anyway,
I have no idea. But I don't. That part I don't particularly see as much recognition goes with that. That part, but with the students, of course. Yeah. And of course, I still have relationships with some of those people. So.
Right. So that's what you value, is that connection and that humanness and vulnerability that you would cultivate with your clients, with your students, and your coworkers.
Yeah.
That's what you want to be remembered for.
And Jennifer Sampson's been really quite wonderful in reaching out to me.
She's the current program director.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was kind of nice.
Yeah.
Some of the others that are no longer there, like, I have no idea what.
Do they even know?
I have no idea.
But do they know what's happening with you?
No, I have no idea.
Yeah, I doubt they know.
I don't have any connection with them.
Yeah.
Nor do I particularly want any connection with them.
Yeah. I suppose, on your way out, you could start talking shit about all sorts of people if you wanted to.
I suppose, yeah.
There's no political fallout.
No, I guess not. But,
well, Paul, thanks for coming on the podcast. And everyone out there, so I always end every episode with, take care of yourself because you deserve it. So I will say, everyone out there, take care of yourself. But why, Paul, should people take care of themselves?
Well, the essence of a competent human being is that they can take care of themselves. So if you can't take care of yourself and you don't feel competent, then you're going to feel depressed or anxious.
Okay.
And also take care of others.